they want to say it's strategic, the decision for Floyd Shivambu to go to Parliament. But if you look at the general consensus, the general take and understanding of it, people aren't seeing it as strategic. Generally, people are seeing it as a demotion. Your initial reading at the news of his redeployment?
Well, good morning, Tidi, and good morning to your listeners as well. I suppose, this is another, occurrence of musical chairs within the MK party that has come to characterize the party, and I suppose part of it is just an extension of how we used to see musical chairs in cabinet reshuffles under the leadership of President Jacob Zuma then, and I think now this is nothing new. But Sidi, you'll remember that besides the trip to Malawi, even within the rank and file of MKP, there have been sort of, some murmurs within the party of dissatisfaction with, the conduct and leadership of Floyd Shivambu as Secretary General. Even the clash that became a bit public with Duduzile Zuma Sambula, which of course she had to apologize for. The point really is that the trip may have proven to be an opportune moment to make the necessary changes with a justifiable act within the party. That's one. But I do think that whether the motive is really strategic or not, there will be an extension of the decision that becomes beneficial to MK party. You'll remember, Tidi, that a lot of people have been complaining in the general public, in fact, that MK party has really been a weak official opposition. It has been overshadowed by a number of, developments and one of those is that even during the budget processes that have taken place, there hasn't been visibility of MK party in the public discourse. And you'll remember that Floyd Shivambu used to be the star debater for the EFF in Parliament, almost his input overshadowing that of Julius Malema during State of the Nation address and various important debates in the National Assembly. I do think that in that respect, if Floyd takes that kind of posture of reintroducing himself as the content-filled person for MK party, it will strengthen the parliamentary bench. In fact, I had actually said this sometime earlier this year to say, I think Floyd is wasted outside of Parliament, where MKP is really struggling. Of course, this also coincides with the judgment around, the former judge, Dr. John Kloppe, in terms of his eligibility to serve in the JSC. And therefore, I think MK party, of course, now might be rethinking its posture in Parliament, new Chief Whip in Colin Makubela and so on. So maybe this is really, whether they are thinking about it as strategic as that, how the general public responds is neither here nor there, to be quite frank, Tidi. Whether people see it as a demotion or they don't see it as strategic, that's just feelings of ordinary people. But the question is whether or not, in terms of outcome, what we will gauge down the line is a much stronger caucus for MKP, and is a much, and of course MKP, as you know, they now have vacancies that they can now fill in this month of June that they couldn't fill for some time, and therefore it will be interesting to see who else joins Floyd Shivambu in terms of deployment to that caucus, in terms of strengthening up. I have no doubt that you can't have a caucus as big as that one. It's the official opposition against the GNU, but it's not punching in a weighty manner that society actually feels that they are doing the work in Parliament.
There's lots of question marks about who else will join, but what kind of reception do you think awaits him in that caucus? Because as you've rightly flagged, that there was this back and forth between him and Duduzile Zuma, and it found its way in the public domain. She's part of that caucus. There's issues. I don't know if you remember, there was a clash supposedly behind the scenes between Zanele Manye and Kloppe over a speech that apparently Floyd Shivambu insisted that Kloppe read. So they already have this bad blood of a sense, from my understanding, between the leader of Parliament, the deputy president of the MKP, and Floyd Shivambu. So what kind of reception do you think he'll receive from the party?
Well, look, I mean, he was the Secretary General, and as the Secretary General, you generally maintain good rapport, particularly with your caucus in the National Assembly and, of course, various legislatures. So it's not like there's bad blood in the sense that they can't work together, but also I can't put it past MKP to say that down the line we might see Shivambu becoming the caucus leader. And it may well be that the former judge feels the parliamentary work is really strenuous to people who are not naturally instinctive politicians. It may well be that the judge is looking at some form of departure from parliament. It's possible, and he contributes to the party, but it allows himself some space to do other things, business ventures and so on and so forth, because it's quite clear that he's going to be constrained by virtue of having been impeached. He's going to be constrained in terms of how great and the extent of the role he can play as caucus leader. So I don't put it past MK seeing Floyd as a future caucus leader there in Parliament with Colin as chief whip. That is, of course, really possible. So I'm saying, whilst, of course, some people might, view him in a particular way, there would have been those tensions. But by nature, politics are a tension-filled. It's how you navigate the tension that really determines whether a party falls or stands.
Before I move on from Parliament, I've got to ask you about what it would be like for Floyd having to face off with the EFF in Parliament. You, I think, correctly said there, he used to be one of the stars of the EFF. I think the EFF has kind of struggled a little bit to figure itself out beyond what Mwiseni Ndlozi and Floyd Shivambu used to be in Parliament. You've seen the rise of the likes of Sinawa Tambo and Sihle Lonzi. But now, when you see them facing off, I mean, the EFF has done a remarkable job over the past few months of trying to focus on particular issues. Do you see them derailing, him getting a core of their attention to one up a Floyd Shivambu who will be in the same room as them? Do you see that being a distraction in any way?
Well, I mean, I got into trouble when I spoke to you about 11 months ago.
Yes.
Because I said that MK party poses an existential threat for the EFF. And I think Floyd going back to Parliament will pose some limbo for the EFF because there are people who literally just wished and hoped to listen to Floyd Shivambu. He is like I said, he's a content-filled person. He's an intellectual in his own right, a scholar in his own right, and I think he will contribute to the debates of Parliament quite seriously. I think for the EFF, of course, the unspoken thing in Parliament is really the place of the Progressive Caucus and whether or not officially they need to dissolve the Progressive Caucus, particularly having seen what ATM did in terms of issuing a statement about next year and their conversations with MK Party. So the Progressive Caucus really seems to now be MK Party and others versus the EFF, and the EFF has to probably make some political decisions for its own survival and its own future to insulate itself as a party from the dominance or imposition of MK Party. But I do think that in Parliament particularly, they will have to think carefully how they continue to determine and drive issues. EFF has a good history of issue driving, and Floyd will probably assist MK Party with that kind of contribution.